strategic planning, the process of developing strategic plan and then implementing the strategic plans, and then performance measurement. So it's kind of really the synthesis of all these three, my primary research. But recently, I've been looking at topics related to communication, capacity building, and globalization. Communication has been really interesting for me because ever since my undergrad in engineering, I've realized that communication is a big gap, that it's really the missing link everywhere, and which is becoming a barrier to the effective implementation of services, both in the private sector and the public sector. So recently I've looked up communication, and I also looked it up from performance measurement angle. How do you communicate your performance? How do you relate your performance to stakeholders? And this is important. And also, how do you train public administrators with the relevant communication skills? And so along with that, I look at capacity building. I look at how public administration programs are training their students to join the government service. And this is where I'm also looking at some of the initiatives in India. I've done a couple of papers on public administration pedagogy at the university level, how universities are offering public administration courses, the UPSC exams. I've also currently I'm pursuing research on the ATIs, Administrative Training Institutes, and how they can help in capacity building. So a bit ambitious, yes, but I'm excited to see how that interlink can happen between the training institutes and academia and the other institutes like IIPA and Labasna, and coming together to train public administrators in India. And definitely the DMEO, Niti Aayog will play a major role in the capacity building of administrators. I also look at globalization, at how public administration varies globally, looking at how are we training our students with a global comparative focus and training them for a global as global public administrators. So the underlying emphasis of all the research is to determine strategies to improve the performance in public and non-profit organizations. So in any aspect, the driving motive for all my research is to improve the performance, how all these factors can improve the performance of public and non-profit organizations. So I take a Preacademic approach to public administration. Public administration is a Preacademic field. It is a field that has one leg in practice, one leg in academia, and I consider myself a Preacademic. So I'm always striving to bridge the gap between the theory and practice, and trying to see how best can we bring the theory and practice together. That is the unique feature of public administration compared to other fields. It is a discipline that really rests on a body of specialized knowledge that progressively invents itself to bridge the gap between theory and practice. So this is also, along with the performance, this is also one of the guiding principles of my research. So public management trends in the United States. So you can look at how things have the focus, especially from not just from government perspective, but from generally, if you look at from the progressive era, industrial revolution, these are some of the general trends. You had first managerialism around the 1960s, where there was a lot of focus on managers. That is, managers are the new leaders. So the shift happened from entrepreneurs to managers, and that was the managerialism revolution. And then came the re-engineering. This is for example, the business process re-engineering that you hear in automobile companies. This also was happening in government, how to totally re-engineer the whole government. And then there was this reinventing government movement, and then the strategic planning process, which was very popular immediately after the World Wars. That became adopted first in the private sector, then in the public sector. So around that time was when performance measurement also became quite widely adopted in the United States, starting at the federal level, and then coming down to the state and the local levels. And then with that culminated the e-government revolution, largely with the passing of the E-Government Act in the US in 2002. And today, of course, we are now entering the era of AI, big data, smart government. So these are some of the general trends in the public management, realm in the United States. And this has been, of course, replicated across the world. So with performance measurement, really it is about how well you're doing as an organization, how our programs, how efficient and effective programs are. So this is the main guiding part of performance measurement. Focus on efficiency and effectiveness. Efficiency is this relationship between inputs and outputs, whereas effectiveness is a larger relationship between goals and objectives and outputs and outcomes. So so the goal here is not just performance measurement, but also performance management. Performance management is the process where you're really applying the context to the performance measurement. That is, you're defining goals and objectives in alignment with the strategic framework of the organization. So it is the main emphasis here is on the alignment aspect. So how do you manage your performance, and how do you improve the performance, and how do you really close the cycle is the main focus here with the performance management. So it's not just about measuring the performance, but how do you relate the performance to stakeholders? How do you use the performance and performance data and decision making? How do you close that loop in the whole performance measurement cycle? So there were a lot of initiatives by organizations in the United States. For example, starting, I would say, from the 1970s towards performance measurement, but later on I'll show you how this emphasis on performance can be dated even a century back. But in around the 70s, you had GASB, which is a Government Accounting Standards Board. They brought out 16 criteria for effective performance reporting. So slowly you had many organizations contributing to this whole performance measurement movement. Then you had the GFOA, which is the Government Finance Officers Association. They brought out some measures for state and local governments to meet standards for the state and local governments to improve their performance. Then you had the National Advisory Council for State and Local Budgeting, which brought out some measures and steps to integrate performance information in the state and local government budgeting. Right? So it's really a series of steps that happened that created the foundation for performance measurement and performance management in the United States government. So really, the first approach to performance measurement was the managing for results approach. This was around the 1970s, where there was a focus on aligning the different aspects. This is as an example, aligning these different aspects towards the performance measurement cycle. So first is strategic planning. That is where you're planning for your goals. And then you have the program activity. Then that is the specific programs, where you plan the specific programs and you align it. Then you measure for the results in these programs, and then use these programs for the budgeting process. That is, you're using this information for the budgeting process, managing the work process, evaluating results, and reporting results. So this was adopted in cities, like for example, in Indianapolis, it was adopted, and then following that in the city of Milwaukee in Wisconsin. And different adoptions, they had different emphasis. Like for example, in Milwaukee, there was more emphasis on the strategic planning aspect, whereas in the city of Indianapolis, there was more emphasis on budgeting for results. This is again in around the 1990s. But it was in the early 1990s that the major push towards performance measurement happened in the United States. So there was this movement called the Reinventing government movement. where there was a focus to reinvent how the government works and try to reduce inefficiency and reduce any obstacles to effective functioning of the government. There were these. There were a lot. So similar to what I said in Indianapolis, in the city of Indianapolis and Milwaukee, a lot of cities and counties and even states in the United States, they were adopting innovative approaches to improve their performance. So they were they followed a lot of like MFR. There were other examples which they followed to achieve more with less. Right? So these two authors, David Osborne and Ted Gabler, they traveled across the United States and they observed a lot of these innovations and they put them together into this book called Reinventing Government Movement. So this book really captures all these innovations and once this book was published, and this is when performance measurement really took off in the United States, and they were able to capture all these innovations and make them readily available for the heads of the governments in the US. And this was adopted by the then governor of Arkansas, Governor Bill Clinton, who adopted some of these measures in the state of Arkansas. And then when he became president, he readily adopted at the national level. So he starts this National Performance Review in 1993, which was headed by Vice President Al Gore. It was a 6-month study looking at how to make federal government less expensive and more efficient. Their emphasis was to really impact the culture of the bureaucracy and try to move it away from complacency and entitlement. So this is how all these forces happening across the U.S. was recorded in this book, and then this book was adopted by the governors and the heads of state, and then slowly it came to the national level, and both the authors were also part of this national performance review. So what happened with the 6-month study? So once the 6-month study were done, they were submitted to the government, and what you see here is the announcement of the results of this 6-month study, right? And it's very symbolic. If you see the background, they've got stacks of papers there, and they were trying to make this point. This is President Bill Clinton and Vice President Al Gore. They were trying to make the point that we can do a lot more without having to do, going through red tape and not using so many of these papers, trying to cut down bureaucratic hurdles and trying to get, having more emphasis on the results rather than the process, right? And so the main principles that they introduced based on the study was, one is to go back to the basics, that is by reducing the workforce and trying to find ways to make government more efficient, to put the customers first. This is the main emphasis, to try to work like private sector. And how do you do that? Is mainly to put the customers first, and to cut down the red tape by eliminating the unnecessary paperwork for states, communities, and cities, and more importantly, to empower the federal employees, right? Make them more responsible, give them more autonomy, at the same time make them accountable for their actions. So with this results, they passed the Government Performance Results Act. So that was really the landmark act, the GIBRA, in the United States. It was that really set the motion for performance measurement at the national level, and based on this act, a lot of federal government, basically the central government organizations were required to develop strategic plans, performance measurement systems, annual reporting systems, and that was actually mandated at the federal level, and then slowly that became adopted at the state and local governments. So in the next administration under President Bush, the push towards performance measurement was followed in a different approach. So President Bush, he adopted the president's management agenda, and where he used a simple scorecard to measure the performance of government. Now, this was the reason he did this is because they realized that the GIBRA initiatives were very effective in terms of collecting the performance measures, but they were not very effective in terms of using those measures in decision making. So they realized that the governments were not effectively using all the data in the decision making, and so they wanted to really have some simple performance measurements where the government can easily use them in decision making and program implementation. So their focus mainly was on 5 areas: performance improvement, competitive sourcing, e-government, strategic management of human capital, and improving performance, financial performance. So this is just an example of a scorecard that was used under the President Bush's administration. So as you can see here, the green indicates that the organization is doing well in one of these in these specific areas. For example, the Department of Education is doing well in competitive sourcing, that is green, whereas this performance has remained largely the same in yellow. And if it is red, then that means that the performance has come down. So this is a very the goal for this is again to have large scale use of this data in the decision making process, because although the GIBRA was a landmark legislation, many of the measures were not able to be easily integrated. And following President Bush, you had President Obama, under whom there was like a pushback on the scorecard, and they went back to this GIBRA initiative, the Government Performance Results Act, and they wanted to they did not want to abandon it totally like under President Bush. Instead, they wanted to go back and improve on it. And so that's why you had an improved version of the GIBRA, which is the Government Performance Results Act Modernization Act, which is the GIBRA Modernization Act, or GIBRA in 2010. So this act really it goes back and tries to build on the best practice, not just from the Clinton administration, but goes back and gets the best practices from both the Bush administration and also from the Obama's administration. So all the 3 presidential administrations, you're just looking at the best practices and trying to integrate it into this Modernization Act. So the main focus here is to improve the governance framework for performance measurement and management. So to integrate performance management, and the main emphasis here is to institutionalize the performance management framework, right? Because they wanted to make it very, very much integrated into the system, that whichever administration comes, these systems cannot be totally taken off. They should be integrated. You don't want to be reinventing the whole wheel. So the main emphasis of the GIBRA Modernization Act was to institutionalize the performance management system, and also to encourage the states and localities to develop their own versions of this federal effort. And this is also when there was emphasis on creating the leadership for the performance measurement system. When you have some of these really powerful performance measurement systems, you also need a leader to head these performance systems. So that's where the emphasis was on developing chief operating officers and chief performance officers. And then today we have so many CIOs. You have chief data officer, performance improvement officer. So there was a lot more emphasis. So really, the performance measurement system at the federal level, it built upon the various administration. And today we have under President Biden, there is in fact, following President Obama and under President Trump, there was not much focus on the performance measurement on the GIBRA Modernization Act. However, today under President Biden, there is a push to going back to this. So we'll see another version of the GIBRA Modernization Act coming. Of course, now there's a lot more focus on addressing the COVID issue, but this is in works right now. So there's going to be some more emphasis on the Modernization Act. And just right now with the current administration has just been in power for 1 year, but the focus of the current administration is on CAP, CAP, which is across agency priorities, the CAP goals, trying to develop goals that cuts across the agencies. So that is one focus of the current administration. So we'll see it slowly, what it'll come out, and then we'll see what their main focus is. So what I have here is the comparison of the GIBRA requirements and GIBRA requirements. And why is this relevant? Is because under the current administration, we are going to go back to a lot more emphasis of this. So you can see how they differ with respect to strategic plan, the planning process, the performance plan, the performance planning process. The GIBRA focus more on the interagency coordination. And then they also wanted to not just have the measures submitted, performance measures submitted to the Congress, but they also wanted to have the performance measures available online. And also if you see in terms of performance plan, there was a lot more emphasis on coordination, collaboration across the various agencies, on identification of goal leaders, data accuracy, and also looking at the major management challenges. So there's a lot more emphasis also on putting everything online and making relating the performance measurement to the stakeholders. So now with the current administration, you will see another column, and it'll be interesting to see how it's varied over the years. So there's also, I just want to briefly just touch upon the best practices and the benchmarking, which is used a lot in the private sector, and it is also used in the public sector. Best practices is looking at what your competitors are doing and imitating successful innovations. Basically, you're looking at how good the organization is doing based on the industry standards, and this is one example where best practices is used is the Government's Finance Officers Association, GFOA, where they introduce some best practices for in terms of budgeting and financial management for local governments. And then benchmarking is also used a lot among local governments and also the federal government. You're trying to compare the work processes with different competitors or best practices in an industry. Nowadays, you have smart cities and branding of cities where best practices are used. The reason for using best practice, the benchmarking, you can identify different opportunities to improve your performance. You can learn for the others' experiences. And the one advantage with benchmarking is you can set realistic targets, because really that you can learn from your peers, and in many cases you can actually collaborate with your peers when the benchmarking is introduced. You'll have a better idea of what your resources are, so you can prioritize and allocate resources. And through benchmarking with other organizations, you can really identify what your strengths are. Right. So just very quickly, these are also followed with regard to improving government performance. When it comes to benchmarking, I just have a couple of statistics here based on a survey conducted in 2016 among government organizations at the federal level. It shows you how many, what percentage use benchmarking, or what percentage is considered benchmarking and strategic planning as effective. As you can see that a majority of the organizations consider benchmarking as meeting their expectations. And the 5 reasons for using benchmarking is to understand the environment of the organization, the business environment, understand the pain points for improvement, anticipate business issues and trends, identify new practices for adoption and adaptation, and prioritize improvement opportunities. Right? And there are different types of benchmarking. We have strategic benchmarking, where we are focusing on the outcomes. And then you have performance benchmarking, where you're basically you are comparing the performance indicators with respect to the product or the service. Then there's the process benchmarking, where you can just compare the process between the different organizations. And then there's also the broad classification, internal benchmarking and the external benchmarking. So I just wanted to quickly introduce you to the benchmarking. So public performance reporting, which is an integral part of performance measurement, and which is really the interest of my specific interests. Why public performance reporting is important is because it comes from this whole practice of public reporting. So you had, I spoke about performance measurement, which really picked up in the 60s, 70s, and then at 90s you saw the GIBRA Act being passed. But this emphasis on public reporting and public performance reporting has actually been quite, it's been there even a century back in the United States. The main goal of public reporting is to create an informed citizenry, because you need an informed citizenry is an effective ingredient of a democratic society. And so if you have the right performance information, citizens can really find them useful for keeping an eye on what the government is doing with the tax money. Right? The citizens can ensure that the government resources are managed effectively in compliance with the law, that the public programs result in the desired objectives and outcomes, and that public services are provided efficiently, economically, and effectively. So performance reporting. So this emphasis on performance reporting again comes from public reporting. And the performance reporting is an integral part of the performance measurement system. This is just an example of a performance measurement system that is adopted at the National Center for Public Performance. You have these 7 steps in performance measurement, of which once you have the monitoring, the next step is performance reporting. And then based on this, you have analysis and action. I also wanted to bring in this quote from the authors of this book, David Osborne and Ted Gabler, where they say that if you don't engage in performance reporting, you really can't demonstrate your results. And if you can't demonstrate your results, you really can't win public support. Right? So that's why you need to emphasize on performance reporting. So like what I said, there is a big history to performance reporting in the United States. Even a century back, around the beginning of the 1900s, many of the cities where they brought out performance reports, they had these Bureau of Municipal Research in the bigger cities like Newark, New York, Chicago, and they brought out these reports that explain how their tax money has been used, to explain it primarily to the citizens. And today, of course, you have a similar version. This reporting is done through the popular annual financial reports. I have an example here from the city of New York, and then the comprehensive annual financial reports. So the comprehensive annual, it's called the CAFR. The CAFR is really the overall report that shows, to the dollar where your money is being spent, and this is being sent to the it is available online, but it's primarily targeted toward the legislatures and towards the budgeting office. Whereas you also have the paper, which is a popular annual financial report, which is targeted towards citizens, and this is where you have measures explained. They are simplified, and it's really like a concise version. Like the paper is the citizen version of the CAFR, and both are available online. And many cities are encouraged to do it across the United States. And GFA also awards cities based on effective performance reporting. Right? So performance reporting is quite highly emphasized in the United States, especially at the local level. And I have some examples here too of how performance reporting was emphasized, like I said, 100 years back too. You have this example of this report, How Manhattan is Governed in 1906, where they clearly explain to you how much does it take to laying the road, how much does it take to really cover these payments, the cost per unit. So what you have here are the various e-reporting systems. So today we have a digital version of these reports. It's called the whole this push is called e-reporting, the electronic reporting of performance measurement. You have various performance stats. the city stat, com stat, performance stat. It's taken different shapes in different cities. You also have integration of this performance stat with the 311 system, which is non-emergency numbers. So I have here various examples of city stat. So here the report is basically, it's like the performance dashboard. You're just putting all the measures online and based, and the citizens can also see this city stat or the performance dashboard. So there are various, again, there are various channels to effectively reporting performance today, and especially now. Now we are in the age of big data, so we have a lot of data. Like if you compare 20 years back or 10 years back, even there was not effective use of data because the data was not relevant. Right now, there is so much data. We are in this, we have this DRIP syndrome, DRIP, right? Data rich, information poor. I think the main focus now is on the data analytics part. And how do you make sense of the data? So that's where the focus is on. Uh, I just wanted to also share with you quickly the GASB, the Government Accounting Standards Board, had come up with their 16 criteria to develop external reporting of performance. And this was in 2008. Here I have the 16 criteria, and it shows you how to effectively report performance in various aspects. And based on this, I did a co-authored paper on where I compared the financial reports and the PAFers and the KFers for many cities and states in the United States, and we kind of ranked them based on their effective reporting. And then at the NCPP, we also developed a readability criteria for the reports. Along with the content, it is also important to see how readable the reports are. So this is a 10-point readability criteria, which also I'll be glad to share with you. This is just some examples from the report of what is it that we looked at. We looked at if images are included, then are the images attractive, is there text spacing? So this is just examples of the 10-point criteria. So based on the criteria, I did a chapter on the reporting of performance measures by the Strap Hangers campaign. The Strap Hangers campaign is it is a citizen initiative that measures the performance of the subway system in the metro system in New York, looking at the buses and the trains and seeing how well they are reporting their performance. So this is just an example of using that NCPP criteria to measure the reporting of performance. So I know I have a few minutes left. I also wanted to touch upon strategic planning and management, which is another aspect of my research. Strategic planning has a lot of benefits to organizations, public, private, nonprofit. It improves effectiveness, efficiency. There's better learning and understanding of what your resources are, better decision making. Main emphasis is how to establish your mission, and you try to see if your capabilities are ready to meet that mission. There's effective communication and increased political support. This is the strategy cycle that I adopt. This is from Bryson. This is a 10-step strategic planning process. It starts with the initial agreement, then the mandate's mission, then you find out the strategic issues through a SWOT analysis, and then you prioritize what your strategies are, and then it finally leading to the implementation and the performance assessment. The main emphasis of strategic planning is to stakeholders, because there are a lot of stakeholders in government. This is just an example of all the stakeholders that the government has, and so it is important that the process really takes up the input from all the stakeholders. And the main emphasis of strategic planning is the mission and the vision. You are trying to establish what your mission and vision is. The mission of the organization is what is it that you are here for? What exactly is the organization? What is the purpose of the organization? And the vision is a long-term goal, right? And organizations often get confused with the mission and vision, which to come first. It's the vision that should come first. Organizations, they focus so much on the mission and then they do the vision, but actually it's the vision that should come first, because the vision is the long-term goal. The vision is where do you want to be, right? So establish the vision first, where you want to be in 10 years or 20 years, and then you establish the mission. Vision is where you want to be in this time span, and mission is what are you doing every day to get there. Right? So that's something that a lot of organizations get confused. Once you establish the mission vision, then you need to develop your values. What is it? What are your values? What are your core principles? What are your guiding values? So the vision is a long-term goal, mission is what you're doing every day, and values are your pathway. Now, because today it is important that you focus on ethics and equity and different aspects. So this is basically your pathway saying this is the route for you to achieve your mission and vision. Right? So this is just an example of how I approach strategic planning. I know we don't have a lot of time, I'm sorry, but I'll just show you the slides quickly. This is again a SWOT analysis, which is an integral part of the mission, the strategic planning process. Sometimes it's called SWOT, sometimes it's called SWOT. Some organizations prefer to use the word challenges instead of threats. So it's basically the strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. So this is an important aspect of strategic planning, where you're trying to understand the capability of the organization. You also have other variations. It's called the PEST analysis, political, economic, social, technological, which can be applied a lot to government organizations. So an important aspect of effective performance measurement and effective strategic planning is the implementation process and the performance measurement. A lot of strategic planning process, the implementation is not focused on much, and this is where leadership comes into play. The political will, resources, authority is important, and also following this is the performance measurement process. You really have to focus on what you're measuring, have the senior leadership support, focus on accessibility, credibility, and usability of the performance measurement. And it's all about having this culture of performance measurement. How that there should be this culture that encourages performance measures, that has this orientation towards continuous feedback. So my emphasis again is to integrate strategic planning and performance measures. How do you best integrate these two? Because if you see, in a lot of performance measurement process, there is not much focus on strategic planning. There's not much focus on establishing the goals, right? And in strategic planning, there's not much focus on the performance measures, right? Sometimes this is just being done as silos. So and in some organizations, there's actually units of strategic planning and performance measurement, and I'm always wondering why they are not done together. In my opinion, strategic planning and performance measurement should go together in order to have success of both initiatives. The strategic planning is important to establish the goals and mission, vision of the goals of the program and the mission and vision of the organization. And then the performance measurement is important to achieve and to make sure that you have the right measures to implement to inform the budgeting process. So with this, Mr. Alok, I know I've crossed 40 minutes. Do you have some more time, or shall we open it up to questions? I'll leave it to you.
I think if there is in terms of closing something on e-government, if you want to emphasize something, sure. I think
sure, Mr. Lopez. So an important part of my research is also on the e-government, which is the focus of which is the implementation of technology in government. I look at how the way we look at e-government. So let me just bring it to this. So for e-government, we have the E-Governance Institute at the National Center for Public Performance, and this is where we examine the productivity and the performance of e-government and how e-government impacts the citizen participation process in government. And through the E-Governance Institute, we support the gathering and sharing of knowledge, information, and data in order to increase the understanding of how e-governance can strengthen the fundamental partnership between the public sector and the private citizen. So in the E-Governance Institute, we focus on measuring the performance of the e-government based on the website performance. So this is something that the E-Governance Institute has been doing since 2003. And these are the various centers with which the E-Governance Institute has been collaborating. You have Marist College, you have San Francisco University, State University, you have PTI, Yonsei University in Korea, Praha in Bulgaria, and you have the Sun Yat-sen University in China. And we do these global, and then I later on joined in 2007, and so I was working at this e-governance institute as a PhD student, and now I'm I'll be joining this e-governance institute and NCPP as a director starting January 1st. So I'll be heading the center, and the focus here is we do these global surveys of e-governance based on the website performance, how effective their websites are based on a 100-point scale. And this 100-point scale is categorized into 5 groups. So we have privacy and security. We have, I'll actually show you this. We have privacy, security, we have usability, we have content, we have services, we have citizen participation. So these are some of the reports that came out from the e-governance institute. This is also a book that we published recently, E-Governance and Information Technology. Here you have the current director, Professor Mark Holzer, who received an award from Seoul based on their contribution to e-governance. And here below, this is a photo of me and my colleague, Professor James Miletsky. Based on the Global E-Governance Survey, we also did e-governance surveys in specific nations, like we did in Prague and Czechoslovakia. We also did in Sofia, Bulgaria. So this is us releasing the results of the e-governance survey of the Bulgarian cities in 2015. So I will so these are the indicators that we used, just a broad classification of indicators. We look at privacy policies, how good the privacy policies are with respect to authentication, encryption, data management, how usable the websites are. Does it have a user-friendly design, the branding, the length of the homepage, then the content of the website, the services, to how effective its transactional services are, and then how the website also enables citizen and social engagement. Right? And based on this, these are the results of the final survey, which completed in 2019. We are starting the next survey this year. Next year in 2022, we'll be starting the next survey. So here you have the results of the survey. And it's also very interesting to compare the survey results over the years, because what you see is many cities do not really repeat their performance. Some cities, except for example Seoul, the city of Seoul has always ranked first, and it's really a leader in e-government. And today the whole of government approach of smart cities, it is creating exceptional standards for other cities. But if you see the other cities, they go up and down over the years, and it's very interesting to see how they've changed and what are the factors that they've changed. And this can be implemented in countries. For example, it can be implemented across India, among the states, local governments in India. And this is the average scores in e-governance of the cities over the years, starting from 2003. And you can see that it has went up to 2009 and then slightly dipped, which of course could be explained to the recession, where there was less emphasis on e-government initiatives, and then slowly it picked up, and now it's just been increasing rapidly. Right? This also resembles the S-shaped innovation curve. Which is in businesses, you have these curves where certain features are adopted slowly, and then it's just gradually plateaus. It increases and then gradually plateaus. So S-shaped curve. So this is a book that we got out in 2018. E-Government and Information Technology Management, Concepts and Best Practices. My author, Mark Holzer, is the director of the center, and James Miletsky was also involved with the center. So yeah, so this is our work with e-governance institute at the National Center for Public Performance, and these are some of the publications that came out of this e-governance institute findings. So, so primarily my research has focused on e-government, and of course with also the performance measurement where I started in the strategic planning, and now there's a lot more focus on communications, and I will just show you quickly, and I'll be glad to share this again with you. This is my focus on public communications. So this is just the articles that came out. Um, I have a chapter on branding which came out earlier this year, digital branding for government public relations, on how why branding is not just a marketing. Branding is a government strategy. Branding can be used for public relations and for governance. If you have an inclusive branding approach, you can actually have citizen participation and stakeholder involvement in the governance process. So that's what we introduced some strategies in this book chapter. I also looked at, there was a recent article that I co-authored with Dr. Nidhi Vij Mali and Dr. Srinivas Yaramsetti on communicative governance to address the COVID pandemic. This came out earlier this year. And these are some of the research I'm involved in right now, using basically integrating all my previous research on websites and performance, and looking at communicative governance. Why communication should not, first of all, communication should not be looked as a separate practice. Communication is a management practice. Communication organization is the basis of any organization is communication, and that should be re-emphasized, especially in government. So this is the goal of my current research on communication. I just feel like communication, looking at all this research on strategy and performance measurement, e-government, I just feel communication is a missing tool. And if maybe it's a magic wand that, if you focus on communication, you can really link the various tools and improve the performance. I also wanted to quickly show you, this is my research on public administration in India, which is really, which has started very recently. In fact, in 2018, whereas I started working on some papers, and I got out this article out in 2020, looking at public administration pedagogy in India, how the various universities and colleges teach public administration. And then I also was a co-author on this book chapter with Dr. Alistair Roberts, where we looked at the UPSC exams, and we looked at the emphasis of public administration and the UPSC exams. And what we found is that there's not much change. It's still largely focused on American scholars and so there's a need for change in both the UPSC exams and the public administration pedagogy in India. I was also a co-author with Mr. Sampath Kumar and Ms. Jay Sharada Chandra Kaladaran on state capacity enhancement project in this state of Meghalaya. This chapter was on focusing on the 5 pillars of performance measurement and state capability enhancement in the state of Meghalaya. And last week I gave a talk to administrative officers in Meghalaya through the CPR, the Center for Policy Research. They are trying to develop a training program for state officers in Meghalaya. I'm also looking very interested in the role of ATIs, the Administrative Training Institutes in capacity building. And then these two chapters, so the one in yellow has already been published, and then these two chapters will be coming out soon. One is on the IIPA, the Indian Institute of Public Administration, and then the role of ASHAs, the public health workers, and then the ATIs is the work I'm currently involved in. So just doing, along with the performance measurement and the strategic planning, I'm also and the communication. In fact, right now, my current projects are focused on communication and capacity building in India. So with this, I will end my presentation. Thank you. I've taken up a lot of time. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Professor Manoharan. It's been wonderful to see the, both the breadth and the depth of the work that you have done. After seeing your research work, I'm realizing that probably one lecture is far too less, and for each of these sort of topics required separate lecture. But due to the paucity of time, what I'll do is that I'll straight away jump to the questions. Vijay, can you go ahead with your question, Vijay? Vijay Abhinandan?
Sir, thank you, Professor Aroon. One quick question was whether you also spoke about the incentives that were shared to improve the the performance reporting. So one thing is the role of incentives. Whether any examples can be cited there of what can really work in this context also. And second is how can incentives be tailored in a way that uh, uh, they are not used to get more financial assistance while not improving the actual quality of data also. So any information on that would be really helpful.
So it's really it starts from the organization level, right? I mean, you have to have that performance culture, and when I look at these report cards, I always think of these report cards in schools. Growing up in India, you had these report cards where you have to come and show your parents about how well you've done in schools, and that is a motivation, right? So I think reporting can have not only an external impact, it can have an internal impact also. Uh, I think the numbers is a great. We need the motivation. Being in government, right? You need to have that motivation to improve. And I think numbers. If you look at that, okay, I've done this much, and then the next. If you set those targets individually, I think it's definitely you can encourage that. And it's very context oriented. Um, the thing is, you have to start small. You can't really just come in and just say, let's just start reporting performance. I think somewhere you have to, even if you develop some measures, you will have to come and sit down with employees saying, okay, these are the measures we've developed. Let's have a performance agreement, right? Let me know how much can you achieve. What is it that you can achieve? And let's have an understanding. So something like that you should bring in. Some incentives is maybe first you don't want to publicly tell the performance. You want to individually just show them this is what you've improved. Compare it to their own performance, compare it to earlier performance. And I think it's all about speaking to the developing that culture, right? Have the performance measures and then bring them in and say, do you want to discuss it? This is what you've done, and from next session or next month onwards, or in 6 months, we'll be releasing it out. And so having that internal conversation and then bringing it out, that's one way. And then the second is, the second question was not to use it financially, right? Or not to, I mean, that you really, that's again, that's the point, because it's difficult. The thing is with performance reporting, what you see is some organizations are very active in performance reporting because again the leader, it all depends on the leader, right? And they want to champion it. So when that happens, what happens to the others who are not at all interested? And so that motivation level, it kind of impacts the other organizations. So it starts at the individual level, and I think it's really one way I think would be to have this performance officer, with like what the GIBRA did, right? Having performance measurement is 24/7 task. It's something that it's not just measuring performance. I think it's more about using the performance measures to improve the organization. I think the shift should happen from performance measurement to performance improvement. And for that, there should be somebody who is, again, this is my opinion, there should be somebody who is always thinking about the performance improvement. And that's why we need a chief performance officer. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, the next question is from Metri. Metri, can you go ahead with your question? Metri? So, I'll just sort of read out the, question which Metri had. I think probably she has issues. Thank you for such a wonderful presentation. I had just one question on how does performance measurement ensure healthy competition as well as collaboration between government departments? So, probably she's asking in terms of, because we have, as part of competitive and cooperative federalism, we have introduced a number of sort of, these performance measures, measurement, right from such the survection to like, for health, for schools, for, and, does it lead to sort of healthy competition? And, does it lead to collaborative government? Because, government has to be a seamless entity.
Yeah, it can definitely improve, because I mean, the thing is, if you have these cross-agency priority goals, right? instead of there should be a venue where governments can collaborate towards a common goal. So if we can set those common goals, again, a lot of this thing goes back to the initial setting of goals, Maitri. I mean, it's not, we can't just have performance measurement come in at a later stage. You have to think of performance right from the beginning. You have to think of organizational involvement in the setting of goals. And this is where if the organizations can work together on the setting of goals, then that can actually, you can have an internal competition between the organizations, right? How well they are doing. And yeah, it can definitely improve, especially with the benchmarking. You're learning from the other organization. And maybe there are certain aspects that there's certain, you can find out what one organization does well in certain fields and then try to see if there are any areas of collaborating with each other. So,
you have any other question before I give some closing remarks? Any other questions? You can just simply raise your hand. Okay, great. So since we are running out of time, more or less, Professor Manoharan, it's been great, and probably we have discussed at some point that we have been working with outcome monitoring framework, and it's been close to 4 years now, and we have been making progress towards pushing government from input-led approaches to sort of output and outcomes. So I mean, it's going to be pretty difficult, but government's ministries have been more forthcoming, and not only this thing that I mean, this performance on output outcome monitoring, this is reviewed at the level of the vice chairman or the member of Niti Aayog, where the secretary is present. So that is something which is which has been a remarkable step in last 2 years. More so, now the log frame is part of the EFCs, that is the basic project or program or scheme proposal, which goes to the Ministry of Finance. So each ministry has to actually think through that, what are the inputs, what are the activities that they propose to undertake as part of that project or scheme, and then sort of what are the outputs that they are sort of looking at, what are the outcomes that they are looking at, which are aligned to the objectives, objectives of the scheme, and then what are the kind of data sources they have for for measuring those output outcomes. So that's how we have been working, and as part of cross-agency performance that you highlighted, we have sector-specific reviews which Honorable Prime Minister himself does. So sector-specific I mean, reviews that actually cut across different ministries, the silos that each ministry capacity building. You did highlight the role of ATIs in capacity building. In fact, today itself, we had a conference with all the ATIs and CTIs, Administrative Training Institution, which has the state-based, and the Central Training Institution, including Labasna. And we are working with because these are institutions which get a dedicated cohort of I mean, in-service officers. And that's where we are beginning to work with them in the monitoring and evaluation space. So for that, I mean, government is taking a different approach to sort of, improving the performance. It has come up with competency framework. There's a framework for roles, activities, and competencies. And each department is supposed to have a tracking unit, so-called, which would look at competencies, I mean, which would be sort of measured. Initial measurement, and then what is desired, and then the kind of inputs, learning inputs that are that are to be provided, so that performance improves, and those competencies are realized. So, number of initiatives that the government has been taking. We are also EU-cited Meghalaya. So, I mean, our state team here is working with Meghalaya, government of Meghalaya, to develop block-level indicators. I mean, e-governance, yes, last few years, e-governance has come a long way. I think all the service delivery functions, are e-enabled, and especially the JAM, Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, and mobile. Yeah, I mean, that has provided, that Trioca or Trinity has provided some kind of framework for providing all the financing or the banking services. You can reach the last mile, last person there. So, number of sort of, activities are being undertaken. Yes, we have some challenges in terms of performance reporting. How do we do it? And, so that it's, except, it becomes like You said that performance management has to move to performance improvement. Again, doesn't just remain performance measurement. And that's what we would be sort of, working towards. By institutionalizing both monitoring and evaluations. So, it's been great sort of listening to you, Professor Aroon. We will continue to be in touch with you, to seek your regular inputs on some of the initiatives that we are undertaking, and that will help us, bringing that, comparative research, the breadth of research that you bring, to whatever activities that we are undertaking. That would be so great. Please do, whenever you do happen to be in India, please do visit us so that we'll be able to talk about it, talk about your work in a specific association that we can forge with you. Given the kind of work that you had done, focused on India. So thanks a lot. It's been our pleasure, and thank you so much for sparing this valuable time.
Thank you, Mr. Alok. Really, thank you for this opportunity. It's been so, really honored to talk to you and interact with all your colleagues. I'm really looking forward because, again, as I said, I'm a Preacademic, and I really look forward. And working with DMU, Niti Aayog is really very. It's very exciting to see all the initiatives. We've interacted earlier, and so it's exciting to see. And I'll be glad to help in any aspect in terms of research, or even speaking to some of your colleagues. So please feel free to reach out. And there was again, before I leave, just one very quick thing. In response to questions from Maitre and Vijay, I think it's important that we celebrate the success. That's something rather than just punishing people, organizations that don't perform well. It's difficult. Organizations have different factors. I think you should focus more on celebrating the organizations that do well, right? And if you focus more on that, then that can have a positive motivation. So
that's right.
So yeah, it's a lot of thoughts. The thing is, it's 7 o'clock a.m. So I have so many things to think about. Yeah, definitely positive reinforcement. So yes, thank you, Mr. Alok.
Okay, thanks a lot. Thanks everybody for joining this session. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Professor. Thanks, Alok, sir.
So, Mr. Alok, just want to know is it okay if I take a screenshot, if everybody, just to show to my dean. I don't know if people will be switching on, so I'll just take one. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Alok.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. We'll keep in touch.
Yeah, sure.